For thousands of years, people across deserts, rivers, jungles, and empires lifted their eyes to the same night sky and believed it was speaking to them. They carved calendars, built temples, and aligned monuments according to patterns moving silently above their heads. To them, eclipses, comets, and rising stars were not random events, but signals tied to floods, wars, collapse, and renewal. Entire civilizations organized their lives around these celestial cycles, convinced that history itself followed the rhythm of the heavens. Even today, those ancient records remain, raising an unsettling question. Were they only measuring time, or were they tracking something far more powerful? The night sky, vast and unyielding, has always intrigued humanity. For centuries, ancient civilizations looked to the heavens, finding patterns, meaning, and, most unsettling of all, predictions of fate. There is something about the stars that felt like more than mere decoration above the earth. They were seen not as distant balls of gas, but as divine messengers, guiding the course of history, even foretelling moments of cataclysmic destruction. But what if the alignment of the stars wasn't just a symbol of cosmic beauty or randomness? What if, instead, it was a direct link to events that could shape or shatter entire civilizations? It's a concept so foreign to modern thinking that it often feels like the stuff of ancient myth or mystical fantasy. Yet for the ancients, the movements of the heavens were sacred, ritualistic, necessary, and, at times, terrifying. Picture the great Mayan cities under the starry sky. The Maya were masters of time, using the stars not only to guide their crops, but to foretell cycles of birth and destruction. Their intricate calendars didn't just track the passage of days, weeks, or years. They were coded messages of cosmic harmony and chaos. They believed that each great cycle of time, marked by the movement of the stars, was bound to end, and with its end would come a great cataclysm. The year 2012, for instance, became a focal point for modern prophecy, but the true meaning behind the end of the Mayan long count calendar remains a mystery to this day. Was it truly the end of the world, or simply the end of a cycle? The Maya were not alone in seeing the heavens as more than just a backdrop to earthly existence. The Egyptians, too, were well-versed in star lore, believing that the rising of the star Sirius heralded not just the start of the Nile's annual flooding, but also cosmic renewal, and sometimes devastation. To the Egyptians, the stars weren't mere points in the sky. They were gods, guides, and heralds of divine intervention. But the truth about these ancient understandings of time and the heavens goes much deeper. It's not just about what they observed, it's about what they believed the stars were trying to tell them. As we look back now, we find that these civilizations seem to have been deeply attuned to the movements of the heavens, tracking the intricate cycles that link the Earth with the cosmos. Yet, even more startling is the notion that these ancient calendars, far from being quaint relics of a primitive society, were meant to track more than just time. They were designed to track cosmic cataclysms, disasters, and moments of global transformation. The question, then, isn't merely whether these predictions were true, but why ancient cultures were so fixated on linking celestial alignments with the fate of their civilizations. Think of the ancient Babylonian sky gazers who saw in the stars the signs of imminent destruction. They meticulously charted the movements of planets and stars, believing that each alignment was a harbinger of something momentous. The Babylonians, through texts like the Enuma Anu Enlil, recorded thousands of celestial omens that corresponded to real-world events, battles, plagues, even the fall of kings. Their calendar wasn't just a record of time. It was a map of fate itself. In fact, many ancient peoples believed that the alignment of stars didn't just mark time. They foretold disasters. A comet, for example, wasn't just a strange visitor from the heavens. It was an omen of doom, a celestial warning that something was about to change on Earth, something catastrophic. Then there were the Zoroastrians of Persia, who believed that the stars were a reflection of divine will. Their calendar, though complex, was bound to an apocalyptic vision of the future, where cosmic order would eventually battle chaos, a cataclysmic event that would cleanse the world. The Zoroastrian calendar predicted that the universe would undergo periodic cataclysms, and the return of the great cosmic savior would mark the beginning of a new cycle. Their idea of cosmic time wasn't linear, but cyclical, and it was the stars themselves that marked the beginning and end of these vast epochs. This connection between the stars and earthly fate is more than just theory. For millennia, the stars have been the subject of intense study, but it wasn't just astronomers who were looking up. Priests, shamans, and rulers alike believed that by understanding the heavens, they could understand their own fate. The Sothic cycle of the Egyptians, for example, was tied to the annual flooding of the Nile, a ritualistic event that they believed was linked to the return of the star Sirius. When the star rose in the pre-dawn sky, it wasn't just a beautiful celestial event. It was a signal that the great cosmic forces were at work, preparing the land for a new cycle of life or death. The Egyptians believed that the flooding of the Nile was a direct reflection of divine will, and as such, they tied their calendar to the celestial rhythms of the stars, seeing in them the fate of their empire. This idea of celestial prophecy didn't just exist in the distant past. It continued to shape the world in more subtle ways. Even today, we find ourselves living in a time where ancient prophecies and celestial alignments continue to inspire both fear and fascination. The modern obsession with the year 2012, which was linked to the end of the Mayan calendar, is just one example of how ancient wisdom still echoes through time. But what if we've missed something? What if the ancients weren't just predicting the future? They were warning us. Could it be that the stars were never meant to just guide us through time, but to warn us of times when the world would be tested, when cataclysmic events would come? The idea that the stars could foretell disaster is an unsettling thought, but it's one that has been central to many ancient cultures. From the Mayan end-of-cycle prophecies to the Egyptian reverence for the Sothic cycle, the belief that celestial events could bring about the end of an era is deeply ingrained in human history. But what's even more fascinating is the fact that these predictions were often linked to cataclysmic events: earthquakes, floods, plagues, and wars. In some ways, the ancient calendars weren't just tracking time. They were preparing for what might be the most catastrophic events in human history. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether these ancient calendars were accurate, but why they predicted these cataclysmic cycles in the first place. Was it simply a reflection of ancient superstition, or was there something more? Could the stars, in fact, hold the key to understanding the patterns of history and the cataclysmic events that shape our world? The more we study ancient calendars, the more we begin to understand that these civilizations were not just creating tools to measure the passage of time. They were recording something much more profound: the belief that the stars, in all their mysterious glory, could guide and shape the fate of civilizations. In that belief, there may lie a deeper truth, one that we may still be trying to understand today. The stars have always been a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the fragility of human existence. While we may now think of time in linear terms, for the ancients, time was cyclical, repeating, evolving, always coming back around. And in those cycles, they saw not just the possibility of life, but the inevitability of destruction. These ancient civilizations understood that all things must come to an end, and the stars, with their infinite patterns and movements, were the most reliable indicators of that inevitable truth. Perhaps, in their wisdom, they were trying to prepare us for the inevitable, to remind us that the heavens are not just a passive backdrop to our lives, but active players in the drama of human history. From the earliest known civilizations, humanity has had an innate desire to understand the patterns and rhythms of the cosmos. Long before modern telescopes and advanced astronomical theories, the ancients understood that the stars were not random points of light scattered across the sky. To them, the stars, planets, and celestial bodies were not merely objects to observe. They were the key to understanding the very fabric of time itself. These cultures, whether the Egyptians, Maya, or Mesopotamians, developed intricate systems of calendars that did more than mark the passage of days. These calendars were intertwined with the movements of the heavens and were designed to track celestial events, including alignments and shifts that they believed had the power to influence life on Earth. But the real mystery lies in the fact that these ancient calendars did not just serve practical purposes. They were symbolic tools that offered insight into the great cosmic cycles of destruction and rebirth. These were not mere tools of convenience. They were windows into a much larger cosmic order. The ancient civilizations that looked to the stars were also deeply aware of the forces beyond their control. The Maya, in particular, constructed an elaborate system of timekeeping, most notably the long count calendar, which tracked large-scale cosmic cycles. What makes this calendar so fascinating isn't just its complexity, but its ability to predict significant astronomical events. While many people today think of the long count calendar as the harbinger of the 2012 apocalypse, the real significance of this calendar goes far beyond a single date. The Maya saw time as a series of repeating cycles, each of which had a beginning and an end. And the end of a cycle wasn't just a passage of time. It was a cosmic reset, a moment that brought both destruction and renewal. The calendar itself was a tool for tracking these cycles, making it clear that time, as the Maya understood it, wasn't linear but cyclical, constantly evolving in great loops, with each loop representing an era of cosmic balance. For the Maya, the completion of each cycle meant the potential for something immense to occur, whether it was the rise of a new civilization or the destruction of the old. When we look at the Mayan calendar today, we often focus on the infamous 2012 date, believing it marked the end of the world. However, the Mayan worldview was much more complex than this. For them, time was not a simple series of tick marks on a clock. It was an ongoing, interconnected series of cosmic events. In fact, the end of a cycle wasn't an ending in the traditional sense. It was a transformation. And for the Maya, this cyclical view of time was intimately tied to the heavens. The movements of the stars, the rising and setting of the planets, and the alignment of constellations all had profound significance for the Maya. These alignments, often seen as moments of cosmic convergence, were not just seen as coincidences. They were moments that represented the coming of change, the potential for either a great renewal or a catastrophic event. But the Maya were not alone in their belief that the heavens held the key to understanding human destiny. In Egypt, the relationship between the stars and time was just as significant. The Egyptians were famous for their advancements in both astronomy and mathematics, but it was their understanding of the cycles of the stars that made their system of timekeeping so profound. Unlike the Maya, who followed a cyclical approach to time, the Egyptians focused heavily on the precise movement of celestial bodies and their relationship to earthly events. One of the key celestial events in Egyptian astronomy was the annual flooding of the Nile River, which occurred when the star Sirius rose in the sky just before dawn. This event was crucial for Egypt's agricultural calendar, as the floodwaters would irrigate the land, ensuring a prosperous harvest. But the Egyptians saw this event as more than just a natural phenomenon. To them, it was a sign of divine intervention, a signal from the gods that the forces of nature were aligned and in harmony. For them, the rise of Sirius marked not just the start of a new season, but the beginning of a new cosmic cycle. It was a moment when the heavens and earth were in perfect harmony, and this alignment brought both life and potential catastrophe. The Egyptians believed that when these cosmic events aligned, it was a sign of divine will, either a blessing or a warning. At the same time, the Egyptians also understood that these alignments were fleeting. The stars did not always align perfectly, and when they did not, it was often seen as a sign of instability. The Egyptians' reverence for celestial cycles was deeply tied to their religious beliefs, and they saw the movement of the stars as symbolic of the forces of chaos and order. Just as the rise of Sirius could mark the beginning of a season of abundance, its absence or misalignment could signify a time of crisis. This belief in celestial order and chaos was not unique to Egypt. It was found across many ancient cultures, each of which had their own interpretation of how the heavens influenced their lives. The Babylonians, for example, believed that the stars were not just celestial bodies, but divine messengers that foretold the fate of kings and empires. The Babylonians were obsessed with celestial omens, creating detailed records of planetary movements and alignments that they believed could predict everything from military victories to natural disasters. Their most famous work, the Enuma Anu Enlil, was a collection of thousands of celestial omens that detailed the significance of planetary conjunctions, lunar eclipses, and the movement of stars. For the Babylonians, these celestial phenomena were more than just astronomical events. They were signs of divine will, warnings of future calamities, or signs of favor from the gods. They believed that the alignment of certain stars could predict not just the fate of an individual, but the fate of entire civilizations. And like the Maya and Egyptians, the Babylonians believed that the stars were not static, but part of an ongoing cycle that mirrored the rise and fall of civilizations. This belief in the cyclical nature of time and the influence of the stars was not limited to the ancient world. Even in more recent times, astronomers and scholars have sought to understand how celestial events align with the rise and fall of civilizations. The concept of the precession of the equinoxes, for example, is based on the gradual shift in the Earth's axis over thousands of years, which causes the position of the stars to change. This phenomenon, which the ancients were keenly aware of, led to the idea of the Great Year, a vast cosmic cycle that lasts about 25,800 years, during which the Earth slowly shifts its position relative to the stars. Many ancient cultures, including the Egyptians and the Greeks, understood the precession of the equinoxes and used it to track the larger cycles of time. For them, the precession marked the rise and fall of ages, and each age was characterized by its own set of celestial events. The Greeks, in particular, were fascinated by the idea that the stars and planets could influence not only the fate of individuals, but the fate of entire societies. The concept of astrology, which has its roots in ancient Mesopotamia, grew out of the belief that the movements of the stars had a direct impact on human affairs. For the Greeks, the alignment of the stars could signal the arrival of a new era, one of prosperity or one of catastrophe. The idea that time itself was cyclical and that the alignment of the stars marked the beginning or end of these cycles was central to their understanding of history and destiny. This belief in cosmic cycles would later influence Western thought, particularly during the Renaissance, when scholars and mystics began to look back to the ancient Greeks and their ideas about celestial influence. Throughout all of this, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The ancients were not just observing the stars. They were living in a world where the heavens were seen as active participants in the drama of life. Whether it was the rise of Sirius in Egypt, the conjunctions of planets in Babylon, or the long count cycles of Maya, the celestial bodies were more than just objects to be studied. They were seen as divine forces that shaped the fate of humanity. These ancient calendars were not merely functional tools for tracking time. They were deeply intertwined with the belief that time itself was a cosmic cycle, with each moment marked by celestial events that had the power to shape the fate of civilizations. In the heart of the dense jungles of Central America, a civilization arose that would leave an indelible mark on the world's understanding of time. The Maya were not just builders of majestic pyramids or creators of intricate art. They were masters of an entirely different realm, the realm of time. Unlike most other ancient cultures that used rudimentary methods to track the passage of days, the Maya developed a complex and sophisticated system of calendars. These calendars were not merely for recording the days, but for predicting cosmic events, marking the cycles of the heavens, and understanding the rhythms of the universe. In fact, the Maya's understanding of time was so intricate and precise that it continues to mystify historians and archaeologists to this day. Of all the calendars they created, it was the long count calendar that stands out as one of the most significant and enigmatic of all. The long count calendar was a monumental achievement. Unlike the more commonly known solar calendars used by other civilizations, which only track the yearly passage of time, the long count calendar was designed to track much larger cycles, vast spans of time that far exceeded the human lifespan. In its most basic form, the long count was a system that counted the days from a fixed starting point, a day that is referred to as the creation date. This date, which corresponds to August 11th, 3114 BCE in the Gregorian calendar, marked the beginning of a new cycle of time in the Maya worldview. The Maya believed that time was not linear, but cyclical, with each cycle representing a new era in the cosmic drama of existence. This concept of cyclical time is at the heart of the Maya's understanding of the universe, and it was embedded deeply into their calendar systems. To the Maya, time wasn't just a passive progression. It was a living force that shaped everything around them. The long count calendar was designed to track these cosmic cycles, breaking them down into smaller periods called backtons. Each backton lasted roughly 394 years, and at the end of each backton, the world was thought to experience a great renewal or a transformative event. These cycles weren't merely theoretical constructs. They were tied to the movements of the heavens, to the alignment of the stars and planets, to the rise and fall of empires, and to the ultimate fate of humanity. The Maya believed that each cycle would culminate in a moment of dramatic change, a cosmic reset where the old would be destroyed and the new would be born. The culmination of one of these cycles, marked by the end of the 13th backton, became the focal point of the 2012 prophecy, the end of the world, or rather, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. But the end of the world, as predicted by the 2012 prophecy, was not seen by the Maya as a sudden cataclysmic event. Rather, it was a moment of transformation, a time when the old order would be swept away to make way for the new. For the Maya, the end of a cycle was a moment of both destruction and rebirth, a time when the world would undergo a fundamental shift. The idea that the end of the world could be linked to the completion of a calendar cycle is a concept that's hard for us to grasp in our linear conception of time. We see time as an unbroken chain stretching from past to present to future, with no real beginning or end. But for the Maya, time was a series of interconnected cycles that could reset at any moment, bringing about radical change. This cyclical view of time was deeply embedded in their culture, influencing their religious beliefs, their understanding of nature, and their approach to life itself. The concept of cyclical time was not unique to the Maya. In fact, it was shared by many ancient cultures, each with their own interpretation of how time worked and what it meant for the fate of humanity. But the Maya were perhaps the most sophisticated in their understanding and application of this concept. Their calendars were not just tools for tracking the passing of days, but instruments for understanding the deeper patterns of the universe. They were intimately tied to their understanding of the cosmos, and every event, from the alignment of the stars to the rise and fall of kings, was seen as part of a larger cosmic plan. The Maya believed that everything in the universe, from the smallest insect to the largest celestial body, was interconnected, and that the movement of the heavens influenced the fate of all things on earth. This belief in cosmic interconnectedness was reflected in their elaborate ceremonies, which were designed to honor the gods and maintain harmony between the heavens and the earth. The Maya also believed that certain astronomical events, such as the alignments of planets or the appearance of comets, were particularly significant. These events were seen as omens, signs from the gods that the time for a new cycle was approaching. The Maya were keen observers of the heavens, and their understanding of the stars and planets was unmatched in the ancient world. They tracked the movements of the planets with incredible precision, using their knowledge to predict the timing of eclipses, the rising of certain stars, and other celestial phenomena. These predictions were not mere curiosities. They were vital for the Maya's understanding of the natural world and their place within it. Perhaps the most famous of these celestial events was the alignment of the December 21st, 2012 date, which was thought to mark the end of the 13th backton in the long count calendar. This alignment, which coincided with the winter solstice, became the center of modern speculation about an impending apocalypse. But for the Maya, this was not a date of doom. It was a date of transformation. The end of the 13th backton represented the completion of a great cosmic cycle, the culmination of an era, and the potential for a new beginning. For the Maya, the calendar was not just a record of the past. It was a guide to the future, a tool for understanding the cycles of creation and destruction that govern the universe. Despite the mythologizing of the 2012 prophecy, the Maya were not predicting the literal end of the world. Instead, they were marking a moment in time when a great transformation would occur. The end of one cycle, according to Maya thought, was always followed by the beginning of another. It was a time of great cosmic importance, not because the world would cease to exist, but because the conditions of existence would change. The end of the 13th Bacton was seen as a moment of great renewal, a time when the forces of nature would shift, creating the conditions for a new cycle of growth and transformation. The Maya believed that the alignment of the stars at this moment would signify the arrival of a new era, a time when the old would pass away and the new would emerge. The complexity and sophistication of the Maya's long count calendar reveals much about their worldview. For the Maya, time was not something to be merely endured. It was something to be understood, to be respected, and to be celebrated. Their calendars were not just tools for tracking the mundane passage of days, but keys to understanding the deeper rhythms of the universe. They were a way to navigate the ever-changing tides of existence, to understand the rise and fall of civilizations, and to prepare for the inevitable transformation that would come with the completion of each cosmic cycle. But the Maya were not alone in their focus on cosmic cycles. Across the ancient world, other civilizations also believed in the power of celestial events to shape human destiny. From the Egyptians' reverence for the rising of Sirius to the Babylonians' obsession with planetary alignments, the belief that the heavens could influence the fate of humanity was a common theme. These civilizations recognized that the stars were not mere points of light in the sky. They were powerful forces that could shape the destiny of nations and the course of history. For the Maya, the long count calendar was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that connected their civilization to the cycles of the universe itself. It was a reminder that time was not something to be taken for granted, but something to be revered, understood, and prepared for. Each cycle, each alignment, and each moment in time carried the potential for change, whether for good or ill, and the Mayan knew that the heavens held the key to unlocking that change. In the vast and timeless sands of ancient Egypt, the stars were far more than just distant lights twinkling in the night sky. For the Egyptians, the heavens were a reflection of divine order, and the movements of celestial bodies were seen as signals of the god's will. The Egyptians were not only master builders and innovators, but also skilled astronomers who understood that the key to understanding the natural world lay in the rhythms of the stars and planets. One of the most significant astronomical events in their calendar was the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. This moment, when Sirius first appeared on the eastern horizon just before dawn, marked the beginning of the annual flooding of the Nile River, a crucial event for Egyptian agriculture. But for the Egyptians, this was not simply a seasonal occurrence. It was a cosmic event that carried profound spiritual and prophetic significance. The annual flooding of the Nile was essential for the fertility of the land, as the floodwaters deposited rich silt along the riverbanks, allowing crops to grow and the land to thrive. The timing of this flooding was so precise and reliable that the Egyptians built their entire agricultural calendar around it. However, the heliacal rising of Sirius was not just an agricultural marker. It was also seen as a divine event. To the Egyptians, the appearance of Sirius in the sky was a sign of the goddess Isis, who was associated with fertility, healing, and motherhood. The flood itself was seen as her tears, which flowed from the heavens to nourish the earth below. This celestial connection between Sirius and the Nile flood demonstrated the deep relationship the Egyptians had with the stars and the belief that the heavens were intimately connected with the prosperity and fate of their civilization. But the significance of Sirius went beyond agriculture. The Egyptians viewed the movements of the stars as a reflection of cosmic harmony, an order that governed both the physical world and the spiritual realm. The rise of Sirius, marking the start of the Nile's flood, was seen as the beginning of a new cycle, a moment of renewal and divine blessing. This celestial event was not simply an occurrence in the natural world. It was an expression of cosmic order and divine intervention, and the timing of this event was a matter of great importance. The Egyptians meticulously tracked the stars, using their observations to determine the timing of festivals, ceremonies, and even the construction of monumental structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza. The alignment of these structures with the stars, particularly the constellation Orion, reveals just how deeply the Egyptians believed in the connection between the heavens and the earth. The ancient Egyptians did not just track the stars for practical purposes. They saw them as divine messages, full of meaning and prophecy. Their calendar, which was based on the lunar and solar cycles, was designed to mark these key celestial events. They believed that each star and planet had its own influence on the world below, and by understanding these influences, they could predict the future. The alignment of Sirius, for example, was not just a predictor of the flood. It was also seen as a harbinger of events to come. For the Egyptians, the stars were not passive observers of life on Earth. They were active participants, guiding the course of history. Just as the rising of Sirius heralded the arrival of the flood, other celestial events, such as eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and the movement of the sun, were seen as omens, foretelling the rise and fall of kings, the success or failure of crops, and even the fate of entire civilizations. This belief in celestial omens was not unique to Egypt. Across the ancient world, cultures looked to the stars for guidance, interpreting the movements of planets and stars as divine messages. In Mesopotamia, the Babylonians were equally obsessed with the stars, using their observations to predict everything from the weather to the fate of rulers. The Babylonians created detailed star charts, recording the positions of planets and constellations, and used this information to forecast future events. These charts were considered sacred, and their interpretations were carried out by priests and astrologers who believed that the movements of the heavens had a direct influence on the fate of the earth. Just as the Egyptians saw the rise of Sirius as a divine event that influenced the flood, the Babylonians believed that planetary alignments and eclipses had the power to determine the success or failure of kings and kingdoms. The connection between celestial events and earthly fate was deeply ingrained in the ancient worldview, and the Egyptians, like the Babylonians, saw the heavens as a mirror of divine will. But what sets the Egyptians apart in this regard is the sheer scale of their astronomical knowledge. The Egyptians were not only able to predict the rise of Sirius with remarkable accuracy, they were also able to align their monumental structures with the stars, creating a system of architecture that reflected their cosmic beliefs. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is aligned with incredible precision to the cardinal points of the compass, and its passageways are aligned with the stars of Orion and Sirius. This alignment was not a mere coincidence. It was a reflection of the Egyptians' belief that the pharaohs were divine rulers, chosen by the gods to maintain harmony between the heavens and the earth. This idea of divine order was central to the Egyptians' understanding of time. Their calendar was designed not only to track the passage of days and years, but to align their activities with the cosmic rhythms that govern the universe. The Egyptians understood that the world was subject to cycles of destruction and renewal, and they believed that the timing of these cycles was dictated by the movements of the stars. Just as the Nile flooded and receded in regular cycles, so too did the stars rise and set, marking the passage of time and the changing seasons. But beyond these natural cycles, the Egyptians also saw the stars as markers of larger cosmic shifts, events that could signal the end of one era and the beginning of another. One of the most important celestial cycles in Egyptian thought was the precession of the equinoxes, a phenomenon that causes the position of the stars to shift gradually over time. This shift, which occurs over a period of 26,000 years, marks the transition from one astrological age to the next. The Egyptians were aware of this phenomenon and used it to track the larger cycles of time. They understood that the movement of the stars was not just a reflection of natural cycles, but a reflection of the divine plan for the universe. The precession of the equinoxes marked the end of one cosmic age and the beginning of another, and the Egyptians saw this as a time of great spiritual significance. It was a moment when the old world would be destroyed and a new world would emerge, a moment of cosmic transformation. This idea of cosmic renewal and destruction was not limited to the Egyptians. Across the ancient world, cultures understood that time was cyclical and that the universe was subject to regular periods of transformation. The ancient Greeks, for example, believed that the cosmos was governed by the cycle of the great year, a vast period of time in which the stars gradually shifted and the world underwent a series of transformations. The Greeks believed that at the end of each great year, the world would experience a cataclysmic event, a cosmic upheaval that would bring about the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. The Egyptians shared this belief in cyclical time, and their understanding of the stars as harbingers of cosmic events was central to their religious and spiritual worldview. The Egyptian understanding of time was deeply rooted in their religious beliefs, and it was closely tied to their concept of Ma'at, the divine order that governed both the heavens and the earth. Ma'at was the force that maintained harmony in the universe, and it was the pharaoh's responsibility to uphold this order. The pharaoh was not just a political ruler. He was also a divine intermediary between the gods and the people, responsible for maintaining the cosmic balance. This idea of divine kingship was reflected in the Egyptians' alignment of their monumental structures with the stars. The pyramids, temples, and tombs were designed not only to honor the gods, but to align with the cosmic rhythms that govern the universe. By aligning their structures with the stars, the Egyptians sought to create a space where the earthly realm could mirror the divine order of the heavens. This divine order, as reflected in the stars, was not just a philosophical concept for the Egyptians. It was a practical guide to life. The movement of the stars, the rising of Sirius, and the cycles of the Nile were all seen as divine signs that could guide the Egyptians in their daily lives. Whether it was the timing of the flood, the construction of a temple, or the coronation of a new pharaoh, the Egyptians believed that the stars held the answers to the most important questions of life. The heavens in their eyes were a direct link to the gods, and by understanding the stars, they could understand the will of the divine. In many ways, the Egyptians' reverence for the stars and their understanding of the cycles of time set the stage for later civilizations. The knowledge of the stars and their connection to earthly events would influence the development of astrology, astronomy, and even the idea of celestial prophecy. The belief that the heavens were not just a backdrop to human existence, but an active participant in the unfolding drama of history, was a concept that would resonate across cultures and time periods. For the Egyptians, the stars were not just objects to be studied. They were divine messages, full of meaning, power, and prophecy. They were the key to understanding the larger cosmic cycles that govern the fate of the earth and the heavens themselves. In the vast deserts of the ancient Middle East, there existed a civilization whose understanding of the stars and celestial events rivaled that of the Egyptians, the Maya, and the Greeks. The Babylonians, a people known for their intellectual prowess, were not only the founders of one of the earliest known forms of astrology, but also pioneers in the study of astronomy. They believed that the stars were not random, isolated points of light in the sky, but active agents with the power to shape human destiny. The Babylonians, who established one of the most advanced astronomical systems of the ancient world, meticulously observed the heavens, charting the movements of planets and stars in ways that were incredibly precise for their time. These celestial observations, far from being mere curiosity or academic pursuit, were deeply tied to their belief in divine order and their understanding of the cycles of fate. For the Babylonians, the heavens were not just a backdrop to earthly events, but a reflection of divine will. They saw the stars as living entities, each one imbued with meaning and purpose. The Babylonians' belief system was heavily influenced by their understanding of the stars and their role in the cycles of time. The movements of the planets, the rising and setting of the stars, and the patterns formed by the constellations were all seen as signals from the gods. The Babylonians believed that the universe operated according to a divine order, and by understanding the patterns in the heavens, they could predict the future. These patterns were not simply astronomical phenomena. They were omens, foretelling the fate of kings, kingdoms, and the entire world. The Babylonians created an extensive body of astronomical and astrological knowledge, much of which has been preserved for modern study. One of their most important contributions to the history of astronomy was the development of the Enuma Anu Enlil, an ancient collection of celestial omens. This work, consisting of thousands of records detailing planetary movements, lunar eclipses, and other celestial events, was used by Babylonian astrologers to interpret the will of the gods. Each celestial event, whether it was the conjunction of planets or the eclipse of the moon, was seen as a sign of things to come, a divine message that could guide the actions of the rulers and the people. These omens were seen as having direct consequences on earthly affairs, and their interpretations were vital for decision-making in Babylonian society. Astrology, as practiced by the Babylonians, was not merely a tool for predicting the fate of individuals. It was a means of understanding the larger forces at play in the world. The Babylonians believed that the movements of the planets and stars were inextricably linked to the cycles of time. The rise and fall of empires, the success or failure of kings, and even the prosperity or destruction of entire civilizations were all believed to be influenced by the alignment of celestial bodies. The Babylonians were especially attuned to the movements of the planets, which they saw as powerful forces with the ability to shape the course of history. These planets, often associated with the gods themselves, were believed to hold sway over human affairs, and their alignments could signal the coming of major changes in the world. One of the most famous and influential planetary gods in the Babylonian pantheon was Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon. Marduk, associated with the planet Jupiter, was seen as the supreme god who ruled over the heavens and the earth. His influence was believed to be especially strong during certain planetary alignments, particularly those involving Jupiter. The Babylonians closely monitored the position of Jupiter in the sky, as they believed its movements could determine the fate of kings and empires. A favorable alignment of Jupiter was seen as a sign of divine favor, bringing prosperity and success, while an unfavorable alignment could signal the decline of a ruler or the fall of an empire. This belief in the power of the planets to influence earthly events was a fundamental aspect of Babylonian astrology, and it deeply influenced their approach to governance and statecraft. The Babylonians' understanding of the stars and their role in predicting the future was not limited to the major planetary bodies. They also paid close attention to the movements of the moon and the stars, which they believed held significance for various aspects of daily life. The lunar calendar, which tracked the phases of the moon, was an essential part of Babylonian life. The Babylonians used the moon to mark the passage of time, determining the dates of festivals, rituals, and other important events. The moon's phases were seen as indicators of divine influence, and the Babylonians believed that the full moon and the new moon were particularly powerful times for making decisions and performing rituals. The position of the moon in relation to the stars was also closely monitored, as certain alignments were believed to have special significance, such as marking the beginning of important astrological cycles or foretelling the arrival of significant celestial events. Beyond astrology, the Babylonians were also keenly interested in the concept of celestial timekeeping. Their understanding of time was deeply intertwined with their astronomical observations, and they believed that the stars were a way of measuring the passage of time in relation to the larger cosmic cycles. The Babylonians tracked the movements of the planets through a system known as the zodiac, which divided the sky into 12 sections, each associated with a particular constellation. These 12 sections corresponded to the 12 months of the year, and each section was believed to hold special significance. The Babylonians used the zodiac to chart the movements of the planets, as well as to determine the timing of events and rituals. The system of celestial timekeeping that the Babylonians developed was not merely a means of measuring the passage of days and months. It was a way of understanding the larger cycles of time that govern the cosmos. The idea that time itself was cyclical and that the movements of the stars could predict the future was central to the Babylonian worldview. The Babylonians believed that the universe operated in cycles, with each cycle marking the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of kings, and the ebb and flow of prosperity. These cycles were not random. They were driven by the movements of the stars and planets, which acted as divine markers for the timing of major events. The Babylonians saw themselves as part of a much larger cosmic drama, in which the movements of the stars and planets guided the fate of their civilization. The idea that history was cyclical and that celestial events were tied to the rise and fall of empires was an essential aspect of Babylonian philosophy. The concept of cyclical time also extended to the Babylonians' understanding of cataclysmic events. They believed that the stars could signal the arrival of great changes in the world, moments of transformation that would bring about either destruction or renewal. For the Babylonians, these cataclysmic events were not necessarily sudden or catastrophic in the sense we might imagine today. They were seen as moments when the cosmic order shifted and the old order was replaced by a new one. These events, marked by planetary alignments or other celestial phenomena, were seen as necessary for the continuation of the cosmic cycle. Just as the rise and fall of empires was governed by the stars, so too were the great upheavals of history. These celestial signs were seen as moments of divine intervention, when the gods would bring about a change in the course of human affairs. The Babylonians' belief in the power of the stars to shape the future was not limited to their observations of planetary movements. They also paid close attention to the behavior of comets, which were seen as omens of great significance. A comet's appearance in the sky was considered a sign of impending change, often associated with death, destruction, or the rise of a new ruler. The Babylonians kept detailed records of these events, and the appearance of a comet would be carefully analyzed by astrologers to determine its meaning. Comets were seen as messengers from the gods, signaling the arrival of a new cycle of time or the end of an old one. Just as the Babylonians saw the rise of certain planets as omens of prosperity, they saw the appearance of comets as signs of major shifts in the cosmic order. This belief in celestial omens and their influence on the course of history was not unique to the Babylonians. It was shared by many ancient cultures. From the Egyptians' reverence for the stars to the Mayans' complex calendar systems, the belief that the heavens could influence earthly affairs was a common thread that ran through ancient civilizations. But the Babylonians, with their sophisticated understanding of astronomy and astrology, were among the first to develop a system that could accurately predict celestial events and interpret their meaning. The Babylonians' astrological system was not just a way to track time. It was a way to understand the larger forces that govern the universe, to predict the future, and to navigate the cycles of fate that shaped the rise and fall of civilizations. The ancient Greeks, who were heirs to a rich tradition of astronomical knowledge passed down from the Babylonians, Egyptians, and other civilizations, possessed a remarkable understanding of the heavens. Their contributions to science and philosophy would not only shape the course of Western thought, but would also elevate the study of the stars and the cosmos to new heights. For the Greeks, the stars were not just points of light in the sky. They were part of a divine order, a reflection of cosmic principles that governed both the natural world and the moral universe. The Greek understanding of time was deeply connected to the movements of celestial bodies, and their ideas about astrology and astronomy would lay the foundation for much of what we know today about the cosmos. Their approach to the stars was shaped by a combination of practical observation, philosophical inquiry, and divine speculation, which sought to explain the larger mysteries of existence and human destiny. One of the most significant Greek contributions to astronomy was the development of a heliocentric model of the solar system. Although this idea would not gain widespread acceptance until the time of Copernicus many centuries later, Greek thinkers such as Aristarchus of Samos proposed that the Earth orbited the Sun, challenging the prevailing geocentric view of the universe. This revolutionary idea was based on careful observation of the stars and planets and was rooted in the belief that the cosmos operated according to rational and intelligible principles. Aristarchus and other Greek astronomers believed that by understanding these principles, humanity could unlock the mysteries of the universe and perhaps even predict the future. In this way, Greek astronomy was not just a means of observing the heavens, but a philosophical pursuit, a way of connecting human understanding to the larger cosmic order. For the Greeks, the stars were not only tools for navigation, agriculture, and timekeeping, but also symbols of deeper truths about existence. The constellations, which had been cataloged and named by earlier civilizations such as the Babylonians, were seen by the Greeks as representations of mythological figures and divine forces. The stars, in this view, were a cosmic map that told the story of the gods, their triumphs and defeats, their love and wrath. The Greek poet Hesiod, in his epic works, often referred to the stars as signs of divine intervention, and his writings reflected the Greek belief that the heavens were an active force in the affairs of humanity. The idea that the stars were part of a divine narrative was also central to the Greek concept of astrology. According to Greek belief, the alignment of the stars at the moment of a person's birth could influence their fate and determine the course of their life. The Greeks did not see astrology in the same way that the Babylonians or Egyptians did. While the Babylonians viewed the stars as divine messengers, and the Egyptians saw celestial events as signs of divine order, the Greeks took a more philosophical approach to astrology. They believed that the movements of the planets and stars were expressions of larger cosmic forces that could be understood through reason and observation. The Greek philosopher Plato, in his work Timaeus, argued that the universe was created according to a rational, mathematical order, and that the movements of the heavens were an expression of this cosmic harmony. For Plato and other Greek philosophers, the stars were not just omens, but symbols of the deeper order of the universe, a reflection of the divine intellect that governed the cosmos. In contrast to the more mystical interpretations of astrology in Babylon and Egypt, the Greeks sought to understand the stars through mathematics and geometry. They believed that the universe was a vast machine operating according to principles that could be discovered through scientific inquiry. The Greek mathematician Pythagoras, known for his work in mathematics and philosophy, was one of the first to propose that the cosmos was governed by mathematical ratios and harmonious proportions. He believed that the movements of the planets were not random, but were part of a divine, harmonious order. This belief in cosmic harmony became a central tenet of Greek thought, influencing later astronomers such as Claudius Ptolemy, who would create the Ptolemaic system of astronomy, which dominated Western thought for over 1,000 years. Ptolemy, in his work Almagest, would go on to outline a geocentric model of the universe, in which the Earth was the center and the planets and stars moved around it in complex, circular orbits. This model, though eventually supplanted by the heliocentric theory, was the most accurate and widely accepted astronomical system of the ancient world. Ptolemy's system, based on his detailed observations and mathematical calculations, provided a framework for understanding the movements of the stars and planets and was used by astronomers for centuries. His work, in particular, solidified the Greek belief in the cosmic order and the idea that the stars and planets were not chaotic but part of a larger, harmonious system. In this sense, Greek astronomy was not just about mapping the heavens. It was about discovering the underlying order that governed the entire universe. Astrology in ancient Greece, while influenced by Babylonian and Egyptian traditions, was also shaped by the philosophical and scientific views of the time. Greek astrologers believed that the stars and planets were not only symbols of divine will, but also expressions of the rational forces that govern the cosmos. They viewed astrology as a way of understanding the natural world and predicting future events, based on the belief that the movements of the stars were not random, but part of a cosmic pattern that could be deciphered. The Greek approach to astrology was, in many ways, more scientific than mystical, as it sought to uncover the natural laws governing celestial events rather than relying on divine intervention or prophecy. One of the key figures in Greek astrology was the philosopher and astronomer Hipparchus, who made groundbreaking contributions to the study of the stars. Hipparchus is often credited with the discovery of the precession of the equinoxes, a phenomenon in which the position of the stars shifts over time due to the gradual wobble of the Earth's axis. This discovery, which would later be crucial for understanding the long-term cycles of time, helped to solidify the Greek understanding of the heavens as a dynamic and ever-changing system. Hipparchus also created the first star catalog, a comprehensive list of stars and their positions in the sky. This catalog was an important tool for later astronomers, including Ptolemy, and contributed to the Greek belief that the stars were part of a larger cosmic system that could be understood through careful observation and calculation. The Greeks also believed that celestial events had an influence on earthly affairs, a belief that was central to their practice of astrology. The alignment of the stars and planets at the moment of a person's birth was thought to shape their destiny, determining their character, abilities, and even the events of their life. In this way, the Greeks saw astrology as a way of understanding the individual's place within the larger cosmic order. The philosopher and astrologer Claudius Ptolemy, in his work Tetrabiblos, wrote extensively on the role of astrology in understanding human nature and predicting future events. Ptolemy believed that the stars and planets could provide insight into the future, but only if they were understood in the context of the larger cosmic order. According to Ptolemy, astrology was a way of understanding the divine will and its influence on human affairs. Despite the Greeks' more scientific approach to astrology, their belief in the power of celestial events to shape human destiny was still deeply rooted in their mythology and religious traditions. The Greek gods and goddesses, many of whom were associated with particular planets and stars, were seen as active participants in the drama of life. The movement of the stars and planets was often interpreted as a reflection of the gods' will, and their alignment could signal major events in the lives of individuals and nations. The gods themselves, in Greek mythology, were often said to influence the fate of mortals through their control of the stars and planets. These mythological stories, intertwined with astronomical observations, created a rich tapestry of belief in which the heavens were seen as a mirror of the divine order. The influence of Greek astronomy and astrology would endure for centuries, shaping the development of Western thought and science. The Greeks' belief in a rational, ordered cosmos, governed by mathematical principles and divine forces, will be passed down to later civilizations, including the Romans and, eventually, the Renaissance scholars who would help to bring about the scientific revolution. In the centuries following the fall of the Greek and Roman empires, much of this astronomical knowledge was preserved and translated by Islamic scholars, who would later pass it on to Europe during the Middle Ages. The legacy of Greek thought would live on, continuing to influence the development of modern science, including the study of astronomy, physics, and even the ongoing search for the hidden patterns that govern the universe. The Greek understanding of the stars as both symbols of divine order and reflections of cosmic principles would echo through the ages, leaving an indelible mark on the way humanity continues to seek meaning in the heavens. At the dawn of the Roman Empire, the stars were once again seen as essential to understanding the world. The Romans, inheritors of Greek scientific knowledge, brought their own pragmatic approach to astronomy and astrology. While the Romans were not as focused on the detailed observations of the heavens as the Greeks or Babylonians, they certainly understood the importance of celestial events in shaping the world. Much like their predecessors, the Romans believed that the stars were not just distant objects, but active forces in the cosmic drama that played out on Earth. Celestial phenomena were viewed as signs, omens, and divine messages from the gods. The Romans embraced astrology with a zeal that was reflective of their need for order and control over the complexities of life, politics, and war. In this way, the Roman understanding of the stars became deeply intertwined with the power struggles and divine mandates that characterized their empire. The Romans were keenly aware of the connection between celestial events and human affairs. For them, the alignment of planets, the rising of certain stars, and the occurrence of eclipses were not merely natural phenomena, but omens to be interpreted. Roman generals, for example, would often consult astrologers before embarking on important military campaigns, seeking to discern the will of the gods and the fate of the empire through the alignment of the stars. In times of war or political instability, the heavens were thought to provide guidance, revealing signs that would either assure success or warn of impending disaster. The belief in celestial omens became so ingrained in Roman culture that it was woven into the very fabric of their political and military decision-making processes. The role of astrology in the Roman Empire was not restricted to the battlefield or the halls of power. Ordinary Romans, too, sought answers in the stars. Many would consult astrologers to gain insights into their personal lives, to determine the best time for important life events like marriage, childbirth, or starting a new business. Just as the Egyptians had used the stars to mark the passage of time, the Romans also relied on celestial events to organize their calendars and predict the rhythms of nature. The Roman calendar, which was originally lunar and later adjusted to a solar system by Julius Caesar in 46 BCE, was designed to align with the cycles of the moon and the sun. The gods, in Roman belief, controlled the forces of nature, and their influence was felt in the daily lives of the people. Even the simplest events, such as planting crops or holding a festival, were conducted with an awareness of celestial patterns and their supposed influence on the outcome. Astrology, however, was not without its critics in ancient Rome. Some Roman philosophers and intellectuals, particularly those aligned with Stoicism, rejected astrology as a form of superstition. They argued that the stars, while beautiful and awe-inspiring, were not agents of fate and should not be relied upon to guide human action. These thinkers, such as Seneca and Cicero, believed that the true power lay within the individual and that human beings had the capacity for free will and self-determination. Despite these criticisms, astrology continued to thrive, particularly in the imperial courts, where emperors would often seek the counsel of astrologers to navigate the uncertainties of their rule. The idea that the stars could influence not only personal destinies but the fate of entire empires was a deeply ingrained belief in Roman society. The relationship between the Roman Empire and the heavens took on an even greater significance during the reign of Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Augustus, who rose to power after the tumultuous period of civil wars that followed Julius Caesar's assassination, was deeply invested in establishing his legitimacy as ruler. He sought to present himself not just as a political leader, but as a divinely appointed figure, chosen by the gods to bring peace and prosperity to the empire. To reinforce this image, Augustus carefully crafted a public persona that was closely aligned with celestial omens. One of the most famous examples of this is the star that appeared in the sky at the time of his birth, which was seen by his supporters as a sign of divine favor. Augustus capitalized on this celestial omen, claiming that his rise to power was not the result of political maneuvering but the fulfillment of a divine prophecy. In this way, astrology and celestial events were not only tools of personal guidance, but instruments of political propaganda that reinforced the emperor's divine right to rule. Astrology during the reign of Augustus also became a tool of statecraft. In a famous instance, the emperor consulted the renowned astrologer Thrasyllus, who was one of his trusted advisors, to determine the auspicious time for important events like military campaigns and diplomatic negotiations. Thrasyllus, who had a reputation for his accurate predictions, was called upon to interpret the movements of the planets and offer advice on the best course of action for the empire. This connection between astrology and governance became a hallmark of Augustus' rule, reinforcing the idea that his reign was guided by the stars themselves. In the broader Roman world, astrology became increasingly popular, particularly during the later years of the empire. The practice of reading the stars, which had initially been reserved for the elite classes, spread to all levels of Roman society. People from all walks of life, from senators to slaves, sought guidance from astrologers to navigate their personal lives and understand the larger cosmic forces at play. The popularity of astrology reached its zenith during the 2nd and 3rd century CE, a period of great political and social upheaval in the Roman Empire. As the empire faced internal divisions, barbarian invasions, and economic instability, many Romans turned to astrology for solace and guidance. The belief that the stars could offer insight into the future, especially during times of crisis, helped to provide a sense of order and predictability in an increasingly chaotic world. Astrology's influence in Roman society was also evident in the art and architecture of the time. Emperors, particularly those of the later period, often sought to link their reigns with celestial events through the construction of monuments and public works. Some of these monuments, such as the Column of Trajan, were decorated with astronomical symbols and depictions of celestial events. These symbols were meant to remind the people that the emperor's reign was sanctioned by the gods and that his actions were in alignment with the natural order. By associating themselves with the stars, emperors sought to reinforce their divine authority and solidify their place in the cosmic scheme. The role of astrology in Roman religion cannot be overstated. The Romans, who had a rich pantheon of gods and goddesses, saw their deities as being intimately connected to the movements of the stars. In fact, many of their gods were associated with particular celestial bodies. For example, Jupiter, the king of the gods, was associated with the planet Jupiter, while Venus, the goddess of love, was linked to the planet Venus. The movements of these celestial bodies were seen as reflecting the moods and will of the gods. Eclipses, for example, were often interpreted as signs of divine anger or dissatisfaction, while the appearance of a comet could signify the coming of a new ruler or the death of an important leader. In this way, astrology became an integral part of Roman religious practice as people looked to the heavens for divine guidance and meaning. The influence of astrology in Rome continued to evolve over time, particularly as the empire began to transition from paganism to Christianity. Early Christian leaders, such as St. Augustine, were highly critical of astrology, seeing it as a form of pagan superstition that undermined Christian teachings about divine providence and free will. Nevertheless, astrology remained popular in the Roman world, particularly in the Eastern Roman Empire, where the practice continued to flourish well into the Byzantine period. The Byzantines, inheriting much of Roman astrology, saw the stars as part of God's divine plan, and astrology continued to be used by rulers and commoners alike to interpret the will of God and predict the course of history. Despite the decline of the Roman Empire and the eventual rise of Christianity, the belief that celestial events could influence human affairs endured throughout history. The legacy of Roman astrology would continue to shape medieval and Renaissance thought, influencing the development of European astrology, astronomy, and even early modern science. From the reign of Augustus to the fall of the empire, the stars remained a source of fascination, fear, and inspiration for the Romans. They were not merely decorations in the night sky, but powerful agents of fate, directing the course of history and guiding the lives of those who looked to them for answers. The Romans, in their quest for understanding the heavens, left behind a legacy that would continue to influence the way humanity saw itself in relation to the stars for centuries to come. As the centuries passed and the classical world slowly gave way to the Middle Ages, the significance of celestial events in shaping the course of history did not fade. In fact, the belief in the power of the stars and their influence over earthly affairs only grew more entrenched, even as the Western world experienced political upheaval, religious transformation, and intellectual stagnation. The fall of the Roman Empire marked the beginning of a new era, one that was characterized by a strong sense of religious fervor and the dominance of Christianity. Yet, despite the Church's growing influence, the ancient traditions of astrology, celestial omens, and the belief that the heavens had the power to influence human events continued to shape the worldview of medieval Europe. During this period, the stars were often seen as a way of understanding God's will. The Church, which had become the dominant spiritual and intellectual authority in Europe, was ambivalent toward astrology. While the Church officially condemned astrology as a form of pagan superstition, it did not entirely dismiss it. In fact, many of the leading intellectuals of the Middle Ages, including theologians, scholars, and even some clergy, found themselves grappling with astrology. They recognized that the ancient knowledge of the stars, which had been passed down from the Greeks, Romans, and Persians, held significant value in understanding the natural world. But the relationship between astrology and Christianity was a complicated one. The Church's doctrine taught that God had a plan for every individual, and that free will was central to human existence. Yet astrology seemed to challenge this idea, suggesting that the stars had a predetermined influence over human lives, limiting the role of free will. This tension would persist throughout the medieval period, influencing the way astrology was practiced and perceived in European society. In the early Middle Ages, astrology was largely associated with the intellectual traditions of the Islamic world. The Islamic Golden Age, which spanned roughly from the 8th to the 14th century, was a period of significant scientific and cultural achievement. Islamic scholars not only preserved much of the ancient Greek and Roman knowledge, but also made their own groundbreaking contributions to astronomy and astrology. Many of the astronomical texts of Ptolemy, Hipparchus, and other classical scholars were translated into Arabic, and Islamic scholars developed advanced techniques for observing and interpreting the stars. They also refined the ancient astrological systems, creating more sophisticated models of the celestial influence on human affairs. The Islamic world's interest in astrology was not limited to academic pursuits. It was also intertwined with religious beliefs. Islamic astrology, like its predecessors in Babylon and Egypt, viewed the stars as signs of divine will. The movements of the planets, the rising of certain stars, and the occurrence of celestial events were all seen as reflective of God's purpose in the world. Astrology was considered a way of understanding the divine order and predicting the course of events. Astrological knowledge was highly regarded in the Islamic world, particularly among the courtly elites. Caliphs, princes, and rulers often consulted astrologers to guide their decisions on matters of state, war, and diplomacy. The belief that the stars could reveal divine secrets and help shape the fate of empires was particularly important in a world that was deeply concerned with the right to rule and the stability of dynasties. Astrologers in the Islamic world played a key role in advising rulers and were seen as important figures in the royal courts. These astrologers were skilled in interpreting the celestial signs, often using them to predict the outcomes of battles or the success of political negotiations. Islamic astrology was also heavily influenced by the belief in the cyclical nature of time, which had its roots in ancient Persian and Greek thought. Like the Babylonians and Egyptians, the Islamic scholars understood that the movements of the stars were not arbitrary. They followed patterns and rhythms that could be used to predict future events. This belief in the cyclical nature of time was central to Islamic astrology, and it reflected a broader worldview in which the cosmos was seen as a vast, interconnected system of cause and effect. The transmission of this knowledge from the Islamic world to Europe would have profound implications for the development of Western astrology and the way Europeans viewed the stars. In the 12th and 13th centuries, as Europe began to experience a resurgence in intellectual and cultural activity, many of the texts on astrology and astronomy that had been developed by Islamic scholars were translated into Latin. This period of translation, known as the Renaissance of the 12th century, brought a wealth of ancient and medieval knowledge to Europe. Greek, Roman, and Arabic texts on astrology, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy became available to European scholars, sparking a renewed interest in the stars and their role in shaping human destiny. The knowledge of astrology and astronomy that had been preserved by Islamic scholars would soon find its way into the hands of Christian scholars, many of whom were eager to reconcile these ancient teachings with their own religious beliefs. Astrology began to flourish once again in medieval Europe, but it did so within a different intellectual framework. In the early Renaissance, astrology was viewed as a legitimate branch of knowledge, and many of the great thinkers of the period, such as the mathematician and astronomer Johannes Kepler, were also deeply involved in astrological study. Kepler, known for his groundbreaking work on planetary motion and the laws of gravitation, was an avid believer in astrology, even though his scientific work later challenged many of astrology's core assumptions. For Kepler, the study of the stars was both a scientific pursuit and a spiritual quest to understand God's creation. He believed that the movements of the planets were part of a divine order, and that by studying the heavens, one could uncover the hidden mysteries of the universe. Astrology during the Renaissance was closely linked to the rise of humanism, which emphasized the study of classical texts and the idea that human beings could shape their own destinies through knowledge and reason. Renaissance astrologers saw themselves as interpreters of the divine, using the stars as a way to understand the will of God and to gain insight into the future. Astrology was not just about predicting personal fortunes or finding lucky days for business ventures. It was a tool for understanding the larger patterns of history and the divine plan for humanity. This Renaissance view of astrology, which was rooted in the idea of cosmic harmony and divine order, would continue to influence the development of Western astrology well into the modern era. However, as the centuries progressed, the influence of astrology in European society began to wane. The rise of modern science, with its emphasis on empirical observation and rational inquiry, led to the decline of astrology as a mainstream belief system. The works of Isaac Newton and other Enlightenment thinkers, who focused on the laws of nature and the physical universe, shifted the intellectual focus away from astrology and towards the development of astronomy as a scientific discipline. Astrology, which had once been a respected and influential field of study, gradually became relegated to the realm of superstition and mysticism. The celestial guidance that had once shaped the decisions of kings, generals, and philosophers was now seen as irrelevant to the new, rational worldview that was emerging in Europe. Despite its decline in the scientific community, astrology never disappeared completely. In the centuries following the Enlightenment, astrology persisted as a popular belief among the masses, particularly in times of uncertainty. During periods of war, political instability, and social upheaval, many people turned to astrology for guidance and reassurance. The belief that the stars could reveal the future and offer insights into human destiny continued to captivate the imaginations of countless individuals. Even in the 20th century, astrology experienced a resurgence, with millions of people seeking astrological advice in newspapers, books, and personal consultations. Astrology, though it has largely been discredited by modern science, continues to reflect the enduring human desire for meaning and understanding in a chaotic and unpredictable world. Throughout history, from the ancient Egyptians to the medieval Islamic scholars and Renaissance thinkers, the stars have been seen as symbols of divine will, tools for understanding the cycles of life, and guides for navigating the mysteries of the universe. Even today, the stars continue to hold a special place in the collective imagination, offering a glimpse into the unknown and serving as a reminder of the cosmic forces that shape our world. The story of astrology, from its ancient beginnings to its place in the modern world, is a testament to humanity's eternal quest to understand the heavens and the forces that govern our lives. The idea that celestial events can shape the fate of individuals and civilizations reached its apex during the Renaissance, a time when intellectual curiosity surged and Europe experienced a cultural reawakening. At the crossroads of astrology, astronomy, and philosophy, Renaissance scholars sought to bridge the gap between the divine and the material world. Unlike the modern separation of science and spirituality, the thinkers of this era saw the heavens as an interconnected web that influenced everything from the course of human events to the rise and fall of civilizations. The stars were not seen as mere points of light in the sky. They were woven into the very fabric of life, acting as messengers from a higher power, guiding both individual and collective destiny. This period saw astrology not only as a tool for personal insight, but as a profound system that could offer answers to the most pressing questions of the time, including the nature of the universe itself. At the heart of Renaissance astrology was the belief that the stars had an intrinsic influence on human life. In contrast to the more rigid, determinist approaches of earlier periods, Renaissance astrologers believed that while the stars set the stage for human experiences, they did not dictate outcomes with absolute certainty. The role of free will was recognized, yet it was intertwined with the celestial cycles that the stars represented. Astrologers during this time often worked with intricate charts and calculations, seeking patterns in the movements of the planets, the alignment of the stars, and the shifting phases of the moon. They saw the cosmos as a vast, interconnected organism in which everything was related, from the smallest particles on Earth to the distant stars. The most famous figure in Renaissance astrology was likely Johannes Kepler, whose contributions to astronomy would later transform our understanding of the cosmos. Kepler, a mathematician and astronomer, is often celebrated for his laws of planetary motion, which revealed the elliptical orbits of planets and fundamentally challenged the geocentric model of the universe. Yet, despite his scientific advancements, Kepler remained deeply invested in astrology, seeing it as a valid and necessary component of understanding the divine order of the universe. Kepler believed that the universe was a divine creation, and that by studying its motions, human beings could glimpse the mind of God. His work in astrology was not just about predicting personal fortunes or aligning events with planetary movements. It was about understanding the deeper order of nature, the hidden patterns that governed both the heavens and earth. Kepler's work was emblematic of the Renaissance spirit, which sought to reconcile scientific inquiry with spiritual understanding. Unlike the purely materialistic worldview that would emerge later with the rise of modern science, Renaissance thinkers did not see science as an enemy of religion or spirituality. Instead, they believed that the study of the natural world was a way to better understand the divine. In this context, astrology was seen not as a form of superstition, but as a serious intellectual pursuit. In fact, astrology was one of the central branches of learning during the Renaissance, and many scholars, including Kepler and his contemporaries, treated it as a discipline that could lead to profound insights into both human nature and the cosmos. Astrology during the Renaissance was not just about predicting events or charting personal destinies. It was, for many, a way to understand the grand design of the universe, the cosmic architecture that governed both the physical world and the metaphysical realm. Astrologers often worked closely with astronomers, mathematicians, and philosophers to develop intricate models of the cosmos that explained how celestial bodies influenced earthly events. One of the most important and widely followed concepts during this time was the idea of the Great Year, or the astrological cycle that governs the entire span of human civilization. This belief in cyclical time was rooted in ancient traditions and was reinforced by the Renaissance interest in Platonic and Pythagorean thought. According to this view, history unfolded in cycles, with the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of empires, and the shifting tides of human progress, all dictated by the positions and movements of stars. The concept of the Great Year was particularly influential in the development of Renaissance astrology. It suggested that the fate of human civilization was tied to long-term astrological cycles that spanned thousands of years. This cyclical view of time implied that the rise and fall of civilizations was not random, but part of a greater cosmic plan, one that followed predictable patterns that could be traced through the stars. For many astrologers of the time, the Great Year was an expression of divine will, a way of understanding the larger spiritual forces that shaped human history. Some even believed that certain eras of history were governed by specific planets or stars, each of which imbued its era with particular qualities. For instance, the age of the planet Saturn was believed to represent periods of darkness and difficulty, while the age of Jupiter was associated with peace, prosperity, and enlightenment. This cyclical view of time and history was echoed in the works of figures like Marsilio Ficino, a leading philosopher and astrologer of the Renaissance. Ficino, who was deeply influenced by the Neoplatonism of the ancient Greeks, believed that the movements of the stars and planets influenced not only the physical world, but also the spiritual realm. Ficino viewed astrology as a way to connect with the divine, understanding the nature of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. He also believed that human beings, through the study of astrology, could align themselves with the heavenly order, thereby achieving harmony with the divine. For Ficino, astrology was not a mere tool for predicting events. It was a means of cultivating virtue, spiritual wisdom, and enlightenment. The idea that the stars could influence the course of history was not limited to the intellectual elite of the Renaissance. Ordinary people also turned to astrology in times of crisis, seeking answers to the uncertainties that arose in their lives. Whether it was the threat of war, a bad harvest, or the death of a ruler, the stars were often consulted as a source of guidance and reassurance. Astrologers, many of whom worked in royal courts, serve as advisors to kings and nobles, offering predictions and counsel based on the movements of the planets. These astrologers were believed to have access to secret knowledge, able to read the signs in the sky that others could not see. As the Renaissance drew to a close, astrology remained a prominent part of European life, its influence felt in everything from politics to religion to the personal lives of individuals. However, the rise of modern science during the Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, empiricism, and the scientific method, began to challenge the long-standing belief in the power of the stars. The Enlightenment thinkers, with their emphasis on human reason and individual autonomy, saw astrology as a relic of superstition and irrationality. Figures like René Descartes and Isaac Newton rejected astrology, arguing that the natural world could be understood through reason and observation, without the need for mystical or supernatural explanations. This new worldview, which prioritized logic and empirical evidence, would go on to lay the foundations for modern science, effectively sidelining astrology as a serious field of study. Despite this, the legacy of Renaissance astrology did not fade completely. Even in the face of growing skepticism during the Enlightenment, astrology continued to thrive in popular culture. Its enduring appeal lay in its promise of answers to life's most profound questions about fate, destiny, and the meaning of existence. In the centuries that followed, astrology would continue to evolve, merging with new ideas about psychology, personality, and the human condition. The stars, though no longer seen as divine agents of fate, would still serve as a symbol of humanity's search for meaning in the vast and mysterious universe. In the 20th century, astrology underwent a revival of sorts, becoming a mainstream phenomenon in the form of horoscopes and personal astrology charts. Newspapers and magazines published daily horoscopes, and astrology became a popular topic in personal development circles, where it was seen as a tool for self-reflection and understanding. This new form of astrology, which was more focused on personal growth and insight rather than cosmic destiny, reflected the continuing human fascination with the stars and their potential to offer guidance. Although modern science has long rejected astrology as a pseudoscience, it remains a deeply ingrained part of popular culture, offering a lens through which individuals can explore their lives, their relationships, and their place in the world. Throughout history, astrology has moved through many phases, from its roots in ancient Mesopotamia to its central role in Renaissance intellectual life, and even into its modern-day iterations. Despite the ebb and flow of scientific understanding and philosophical thought, the stars continue to captivate human imagination. Whether viewed as divine agents of fate, tools of personal insight, or simply symbols of our deeper connection to the cosmos, the stars remain a central part of humanity's quest to understand itself and its place in the vast universe. The legacy of astrology, shaped by centuries of inquiry, observation, and belief, endures as a testament to the enduring human desire to find meaning in the skies above. As the centuries advanced, the role of celestial events continued to evolve, blending ancient traditions with the burgeoning scientific advancements of the Enlightenment and modern eras. Astrology, once a revered discipline among kings and scholars, became subject to increasing scrutiny, especially as the methods of the natural sciences grew more sophisticated. Yet, while the stars and planets may have been relegated to the status of mere astronomical phenomena in the eyes of modern science, their symbolic influence over human events and destinies persisted in popular belief. The rise of empirical science, which emphasized observation, reason, and evidence-based conclusions, posed a significant challenge to the mystical and spiritual interpretations of the stars that had once dominated intellectual thought. Nevertheless, the human need to make sense of the universe and our place within it remains as strong as ever, and throughout history, the stars have continued to serve as a source of guidance, mystery, and fascination. In the post-Enlightenment era, the belief in celestial omens was gradually replaced by a focus on rationalism and materialism, But this shift did not fully erase the cultural and psychological appeal of astrology. Rather, astrology adapted to the changing landscape of thought, emerging in new forms that resonated with a different set of ideas. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, astrology underwent a transformation, aligning itself with emerging fields such as psychology and spirituality. During this period, astrology was no longer solely associated with divine forces or fate, but began to be seen as a tool for personal introspection and self-improvement. The stars, once thought to dictate the course of human life, were now interpreted as offering insight into the individual's character, desires, and potential. This shift marked a significant departure from the deterministic outlook of ancient astrology, as it placed greater emphasis on the autonomy and personal agency of the individual. One of the key figures in this transformation was Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology. Jung's ideas about the collective unconscious, archetypes, and the role of symbolism in human development had a profound impact on the way astrology was understood and practiced in the modern world. Jung saw astrology as more than just a system for predicting the future. He believed it could be a valuable tool for self-discovery. According to Jung, the positions of the planets at the time of a person's birth could reveal archetypal patterns and psychological tendencies, offering insight into unconscious drives and motivations. For Jung, astrology was not a deterministic science, but a symbolic language that allowed individuals to gain a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the world. This psychological approach to astrology resonated with a growing interest in personal development during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As society became more industrialized and urbanized, people began to feel increasingly alienated from nature and the cosmos. The stars, once seen as guiding lights in the sky, were now perceived as distant and disconnected from daily life. In response to this sense of disconnection, astrology offered a way to re-establish a sense of meaning and coherence. By looking to the heavens, individuals could reconnect with the larger forces that shaped their lives, finding comfort and guidance in the celestial patterns that had once been associated with fate and divine will. Astrology's psychological dimension deepened with the rise of New Age thought in the mid-20th century. In the post-World War II period, there was a renewed interest in spirituality and alternative belief systems, as many sought meaning in a world that had been scarred by global conflict. Astrology, along with other mystical and esoteric practices, became part of the broader New Age movement, which sought to explore human consciousness, spiritual enlightenment, and alternative healing practices. The New Age revival of astrology was marked by a focus on self-empowerment and personal transformation. Horoscopes and birth charts were no longer just about predicting events or determining the influence of the stars. They were tools for exploring the deeper layers of the self and uncovering hidden aspects of the psyche. This new approach to astrology was also influenced by the growing field of psychology. As the study of the human mind advanced, astrologers began to integrate psychological concepts into their practice. Birth charts, for example, were seen not only as a map of the planets at the moment of birth, but also as a reflection of the individual's inner landscape, their strengths, weaknesses, desires, and unconscious patterns. The planets and their positions were now understood in terms of psychological archetypes, representing different aspects of the self that needed to be integrated for personal growth. The astrological symbols, once associated with gods and celestial forces, now took on a more personal and introspective meaning. In this context, astrology became a language for the soul, a way to decode the hidden messages of the unconscious mind. Astrology's association with personal transformation continued to grow throughout the 20th century. During the 1960s and 1970s, the countercultural movements that emerged in the wake of the civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and the Vietnam War brought astrology back into the public eye. As young people rebelled against the conventions of mainstream society, astrology became a symbol of individual freedom and self-expression. Horoscopes and birth charts were used as tools for personal empowerment, helping individuals understand their life's purpose and navigate the complexities of their relationships, careers, and spiritual journeys. Astrology was seen as a way to tap into the deeper wisdom of the universe, offering guidance and insight that went beyond the confines of traditional religious or scientific institutions. The modern resurgence of astrology was also closely tied to the development of popular culture. In the 20th century, astrology became a ubiquitous presence in magazines, newspapers, and books, with daily horoscopes becoming a staple of mainstream media. This democratization of astrology made it accessible to a wider audience than ever before, as people from all walks of life sought to uncover the secrets of the stars. The mass appeal of astrology was partly due to its promise of personal insight and its ability to offer answers to life's most pressing questions. Whether it was the uncertainty of a new relationship, the challenge of a career change, or the desire to understand one's deeper motivations, astrology provided a framework for interpreting life's mysteries. As astrology entered the digital age, its popularity only continued to grow. The rise of the internet allowed astrology to reach an even larger audience, with websites, social media platforms, and apps dedicated to astrology becoming increasingly popular. These digital tools have made astrology even more accessible, with daily horoscopes and personalized birth charts just a click away. The proliferation of online astrology has created a new generation of enthusiasts who turn to the stars for guidance, validation, and meaning. At the same time, astrology has become more diverse and inclusive, with a wider variety of voices and perspectives shaping the discourse. Astrology no longer belongs solely to the elite or the intellectuals. It is now a cultural phenomenon that transcends class, age, and background. Despite the scientific community's dismissal of astrology as a pseudoscience, its enduring appeal is undeniable. Astrology continues to thrive because it speaks to a deep-seated human need, the need to understand the unknown, to find meaning in the chaos, and to connect with something larger than ourselves. In a world that often feels uncertain and unpredictable, astrology offers a framework for understanding the forces at play in our lives. It provides a sense of order and control, offering insight into personal struggles, relationships, and life decisions. In many ways, astrology represents humanity's ongoing quest to answer the fundamental questions about life, death, and the universe. Even as science continues to explain more and more of the natural world, the stars remain a powerful symbol of the mysteries that still elude us. Astrology's continued popularity reflects a larger cultural shift, one that embraces both rational inquiry and spiritual exploration. In an era where the lines between science and spirituality are becoming increasingly blurred, astrology offers a unique bridge between the two realms. It reminds us that there is more to the universe than what can be observed with the naked eye, that there are forces beyond our comprehension that shape our lives in subtle and profound ways. Whether viewed as a form of divination, a psychological tool, or a spiritual practice, astrology endures as a testament to the human desire to understand the mysteries of existence. The stars, though no longer seen as divine agents of fate, continue to offer guidance and insight, serving as a mirror of our deepest selves and a reflection of the ever-changing cycles of the universe. The story of how human beings came to understand the stars, interpret their movements, and embed celestial phenomena into the very fabric of their societies is as ancient as civilization itself. From the earliest days of recorded history, the heavens have been a constant source of mystery and inspiration. The stars, with their fixed and unchanging positions in the night sky, seem to speak a language of their own, one that transcended earthly boundaries and connected humankind to something greater, something divine. The way ancient cultures interpreted the stars varied greatly depending on their worldview, but one thing remained constant. The stars were seen as signs, symbols, and harbingers of events both personal and collective. As the centuries unfolded, the role of astrology and celestial divination continued to evolve, adapting to changing cultures, intellectual movements, and technological advances. The most ancient civilizations recognized the stars as powerful forces that could reveal divine messages, determine the fate of kings, and predict the outcomes of battles. The Egyptians, with their deep understanding of astronomy, constructed the pyramids with precise alignment to celestial bodies, particularly the stars of Orion's belt, believing that the god Osiris would guide the pharaohs to the afterlife. The Mesopotamians, particularly the Babylonians, were the first to develop a systematic method for interpreting the movement of the planets and stars. They believed the gods used celestial events as a way to communicate with humans, warning them of impending doom or promising a period of prosperity. Their complex system of astrology, based on the observation of the planets and their positions relative to the constellations, was the foundation upon which later astrological practices would be built. For these ancient peoples, astrology was not just a tool for prediction. It was a means of understanding the divine order of the universe and determining how human actions fit into that larger cosmic pattern. In the classical world, astrology took on a new dimension as the Greeks and Romans embraced the idea that the stars were a reflection of the natural world and the human experience. Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras and Plato saw the cosmos as a harmonious, mathematical system, with the stars and planets forming a perfect balance that mirrored the order of the universe. The belief in a cosmic harmony, in which every part of the universe was interconnected, laid the groundwork for the later development of astrology as a way to understand human life in relation to the cosmos. The Romans, with their pragmatic and militaristic approach to life, viewed the stars as powerful guides to understanding both personal destiny and the fate of the empire. Astrology was not just a tool for personal growth, but was also embedded in the political and military decisions of the time. Roman generals consulted astrologers before embarking on campaigns, believing that the positions of the stars could reveal whether they would succeed or fail. The heavens were seen as providing divine guidance on everything from the best time to wage war to the most auspicious date for a major political decision. As the Roman Empire crumbled and the Middle Ages ushered in a new era of religious fervor and intellectual change, the stars continued to hold sway over human affairs. The rise of Christianity brought with it a new understanding of the relationship between humanity and the divine. Yet the Church, despite its condemnation of astrology, could not fully suppress the ancient belief that the heavens held clues to the mysteries of existence. In the early medieval period, astrology was practiced alongside other forms of divination, such as omens, dreams, and signs, and was often used to guide rulers in their decision-making. Kings and princes, seeking to secure their thrones or expand their territories, consulted astrologers and mystics, hoping to decipher the messages in the heavens. In this period, astrology was not just a tool for personal insight, but a means of interpreting God's will and understanding the divine plan for the world. During the Islamic Golden Age, a period that spanned from the 8th to the 14th centuries, the study of astrology reached new heights of sophistication. Islamic scholars, building upon the work of the ancient Greeks and Romans, made significant advances in astronomy and astrology. They translated and preserved the works of Ptolemy, Hipparchus, and other classical astronomers, and expanded upon their theories. The great observatories of the Islamic world produced detailed star charts, and Islamic astrologers developed more precise methods of calculating the positions of celestial bodies. For the Islamic world, astrology was closely tied to their religious worldview, with the belief that the stars were created by God and that their movements reflected His will. Astrologers were highly respected, often serving as advisors to caliphs and sultans, guiding political decisions and military strategies. Like their predecessors in Babylon and Egypt, the Muslims saw astrology as a way to decode the divine plan, understanding not only the natural world, but the spiritual forces that shaped human existence. The transmission of astrological knowledge from the Islamic world to Europe during the Renaissance sparked a revival of interest in the stars and their influence over human affairs. As Europe emerged from the Dark Ages, there was a renewed focus on the study of ancient texts and the exploration of new intellectual frontiers. The Renaissance, with its emphasis on humanism and the rediscovery of classical learning, gave birth to a new wave of astrological thought. Astrology was no longer seen merely as a method of predicting personal fortunes. It was now viewed as a legitimate science that could help uncover the secrets of the universe. The most famous astrologers of the Renaissance, such as Johannes Kepler and Tycho Brahe, were also scientists who made groundbreaking contributions to astronomy. However, despite their scientific achievements, they remained deeply engaged with astrology, using it as a tool to understand the spiritual dimensions of the cosmos. For Kepler, the study of planetary motion was inseparable from his belief that the stars were a reflection of God's divine order. Similarly, Brahe, though he was a pioneering astronomer, continued to cast horoscopes for his patrons, believing that the alignment of the stars had a profound impact on human affairs. As astrology evolved over the centuries, it became more integrated with psychology and modern spiritual practices. In the 20th century, figures such as Carl Jung helped to reframe astrology as a tool for self-discovery rather than just a means of predicting the future. Jung viewed astrology as a symbolic language that could be used to explore the unconscious mind and gain insight into the archetypal patterns that govern human behavior. In his view, the positions of the planets at the time of one's birth were not just random events, but reflected the deeper structures of the psyche. Astrology became a way to map the inner landscape of the human being, offering a unique perspective on personal growth, relationships, and life purpose. The development of psychological astrology during the 20th century marked a significant departure from the deterministic view of astrology that had dominated much of its history. No longer were the stars seen as dictating the course of events with absolute certainty. Instead, they were seen as offering a mirror through which individuals could understand the forces at play in their lives. The emphasis shifted from fate and predestination to personal empowerment and self-awareness. The birth chart, once viewed as a fixed roadmap of one's destiny, was now seen as a dynamic tool for understanding the interplay between individual choice and cosmic influence. This modern approach to astrology allowed for a more flexible and nuanced understanding of the stars, one that recognized the importance of both free will and the interconnectedness of all things. Astrology, particularly in its modern form, also began to intersect with the rise of the New Age movement in the mid-20th century. As more people sought spiritual answers outside the confines of traditional religious institutions, astrology offered an accessible framework for exploring the mysteries of the universe. The New Age movement embraced astrology as a means of self-exploration, healing, and connection to the divine. In this context, astrology was no longer just a predictive tool. It became a way to engage with the universe, to tap into the deeper currents of life that shape our existence. Horoscopes, birth charts, and astrological symbols became part of a broader spiritual vocabulary, used by individuals to navigate the complexities of modern life. In the 21st century, astrology has continued to evolve and adapt to the changing cultural landscape. The rise of the internet has made astrology more accessible than ever before, with millions of people seeking astrological guidance online. Websites, apps, and social media platforms have democratized astrology, allowing anyone with an interest in the stars to learn about their birth chart, read their daily horoscope, and connect with others who share their passion for the stars. Despite the widespread skepticism of the scientific community, astrology remains an enduring part of popular culture, offering insights into the human condition and a way to make sense of the world. Astrology has traveled through time as a constant companion to humanity's quest for meaning, offering a lens through which we can view our lives, our relationships, and our place in the cosmos. Whether as a tool for predicting events, understanding the self, or connecting with the divine, astrology has played a central role in shaping our understanding of the universe. From the ancient Egyptians to modern-day astrologers, the stars have continued to serve as symbols of hope, guidance, and mystery, offering a glimpse into the vast unknown and helping us navigate the complexities of our existence. Despite the many transformations astrology has undergone throughout history, its core message remains the same. The heavens are not distant and irrelevant. They are intimately connected to our lives, our destinies, and the unfolding story of humanity. Astrology's journey through history is not just a story of divination and predictions, but also one of human psychology, spirituality, and self-exploration. As civilization has evolved, so too has our understanding of the stars. From the ancient Sumerians who studied the skies for signs of divine will to modern astrologers who use the stars as a tool for personal growth and self-awareness. Astrology has been a central part of humanity's quest to understand itself and its place in the universe. But as the centuries have unfolded, the perception of astrology has fluctuated, shifting between reverence, skepticism, and, ultimately, adaptation. The medieval and early modern periods saw astrology exist in a complex relationship with both religion and science. The medieval period was a time when astrology was largely shaped by religious ideas. In Christian Europe, many scholars believed that astrology could offer insight into God's plan for the world. However, this view was constantly at odds with the teachings of the Church, which was suspicious of astrology's pagan origins. Despite the Church's condemnation, astrology remained a potent tool in royal courts across Europe. Kings, queens, and emperors often consulted astrologers to help guide decisions on matters of state and war, believing that the stars could predict future events or influence the outcome of important battles. It was not just kings who turned to astrology for guidance, but scholars, clergy, and ordinary people as well. It was considered a legitimate branch of learning, intertwined with astronomy and medicine. Yet, astrology's standing in the academic and religious communities was always fragile, with increasing skepticism about its validity growing alongside the rise of more empirical methods of inquiry.